Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Chris McNulty, here today with my partner edition co-host, Mark Cashman.
I am your partner in crime. That is right. Thanks, Chris. Very excited to be here.
At Microsoft, our mission is to deliver solutions to help individuals and organizations achieve more. We can't do it alone. So each month, we'll be sitting down with one of our partners who delivers solutions and services to help our customers do more with Microsoft.
On this next episode with our Microsoft Partner Series of the Intrazone, we're talking with our partner Colligo and a special conversation with their customer Ovivo.
You know, Mark, Colligo is based in one of the most fantastic cities in the world, just up the coast, Vancouver.
Yes, very nice. I wouldn't mind being in Canada maybe half the time. Vancouver, Quebec, anywhere.
Yeah, my last meeting with Colligo's founder, Barry Jinks, was on the Vancouver waterfront in August 2 years ago, so it's really hard to beat that. But I wanted to ask you, before we bring them in, what do you know about Colligo?
A lot of what I know about Colligo, and I certainly hope to learn more, is it really gives a visual tool to end users to be able to accomplish what maybe took a number of different steps across a number of different applications, but to then meet them where they are. And for a lot of their customers, that's Outlook. To be able to do transactional move of content and maybe application of metadata before it meets SharePoint and before it's available to other people, but again, limiting where and what they have to do to get it there.
You know, I've always liked their approach because they build on top of patterns that Microsoft has. So if you think about, let's take about OneDrive. One of the biggest advantages of OneDrive is I can take files offline and work on them locally and then have them automatically synchronized. Colligo's been doing similar sync technologies for years, but they allow you to bring lots of different things from different places. They take kind of that core OneDrive idea and say, I want to bring, using metadata, a bunch of random things from different containers into one place and just synchronize that. They take that, so they improve OneDrive, they improve metadata in SharePoint, and they take some of those same things we take for granted in content management and extend it to mail management. I think, it's just great to have been on the journey with them, from on-premises through cloud and beyond, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with them.
So, the one scenario where you're on your desktop, you go to something that you're paying for, and you start to type in your first name, M-A-R-K, and then the computer recognizes that, hey, you're filling out a form. We know your last name. We know you type in this address often. And if you've saved that information, automatically that form gets pre-populated. I absolutely love that. And so when you ask the question, what do I think of, what is Colligo, maybe without knowing it as well as you, I also see it as it's going to be one of those technologies that will help me pre-populate or populate metadata that isn't going to be a 15-field form that A, is going to take me a while, B, I may not know all the answers right away, so I'll have to go looking. But if, as you mentioned, it can aggregate that information across multiple containers to then ultimately land that content in the right place with the right context to make it more valuable now and over time, to me, it's just like filling out that form on the internet. M-A, and then the world opens up because I just click yes. And it fills out my address, my name. Imagine that at the scale of thousands of documents a day across the churn of a project where things change by nature of what somebody says in an email or the status that gets approved. There's a whole nature of things of how metadata gets in, but then the usability of it over time, not only does it change, but the expectation is that there will be the process behind it that will help it change as well.
And they help bring content together in new ways and recognizing new patterns. And of course, today, we're getting to unite West Coast and East Coast, but not in the U.S. sense, in the Canadian sense. We're bringing folks together from Vancouver and from Quebec, where Colligo's customer Ovivo is. So I have to remember, don't let me forget, Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver Canucks.
You always want to know where is the puck going, correct?
Exactly.
Very nice. So we'll be very interested to learn more about Colligo and certainly to hear how Ovivo is using their solution in the context of water treatment plants at scale for what they do for their customers and, of course, through the water preparation and treatment that they provide out to the world. So there's a lot of documentation that goes behind those types of systems. And again, that churn in a positive way of just a lot needs to be documented, regulated, and we know needs to be compliant as well. So coming up next on the Intrazone Partner Edition, our conversation with Colligo and Ovivo.
Today on the Intrazone, we're sitting down with Roland Redekop from Colligo and Jean-Francois Thibault and Michel Guinet from Ovivo, one of Colligo's customers. Colligo is a long-standing Microsoft partner, a member of our Content Services Partner Program, and Ovivo is one of their favorite customers and one of ours too. So gentlemen, welcome to the Intrazone.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
So, Roland, if you can start us off and just tell us a little bit about who you are, and throughout the conversation, we'll really get into more about what Colligo does and how they support Ovivo. But if we can just start with who you are.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm a pre-sale engineer with Colligo. So people ask me, that sounds like a pretty high and mighty term, but basically I just meet with customers. This is my customer-facing role, and when I meet with customers, I kind of discuss their challenges. So usually we get some sort of onboarding process where customers get, they inquire about Colligo, and then I'll start doing some demos with them. And what I really like about my job is that I have a front row view of like kind of the evolving needs of organizations and the modern workforce. Basically, I get the chance to put myself into the shoes of the customer, and then I listen to the business problem that they're presenting to me, and then I apply my experience to that and try to suggest to them, it may involve our product, but often I will, go outside the box and I'll talk to them about just from my basic SharePoint and Office 365 knowledge. And so I try to make them happy, try to think like them, and try to provide them solutions that are viable. And so my secret to success is just listening and visualizing myself in their shoes.
Roland, it's one thing we at Microsoft hopefully have a good understanding of Colligo. You've been a great partner to us, and we really value your engagement. Many of our audience may not be familiar with Colligo, and so I love the things that you're doing with enhanced content management and being able to enrich what people are doing with documents, what they're doing with email, and bringing all those things together. In a nutshell, you've got the classic 25-second elevator pitch. What is Colligo?
Besides the fact that we're a software company, our products essentially enable companies to enjoy the benefits of SharePoint and Office 365 with the least friction possible. And so when I say friction, we try to shortcut their experience of SharePoint. Like if we can save the user's keystrokes, if we can keep them working in Outlook or their document management system and keep them from alt-tabbing around and keep their concentration on the task at hand, then we've definitely added some value. So it's mostly efficiency and helping them to adopt SharePoint and maximize their investment in Office 365.
Let's bring in Jean-Francois and Michel from Ovivo. First, Jean-Francois, if you could introduce yourself and the role that you play over at Ovivo, and then we'll talk with Michel.
Yeah, sure. I am Vice President for Major Projects and General Manager for the North American Industrial Division. Basically, I run project teams from front end to back end, from sales to engineering, fabrication, procurement, project management, delivery, quality. So, and all that process is very documented. So that's how I got involved how I got introduced to different type of document management systems, and then to SharePoint almost 10 years ago, and Colligo as well.
So that notion of removing friction from the heavy-duty document processes that you mentioned was something that attracted you to considering and working with Colligo, correct?
Yeah, definitely. It was the main driver. Although you can implement a very nice and good and well-organized document management system, and SharePoint is, to my opinion, a very good one, it's difficult to get the team to embrace that change if it's too cumbersome, or if there are too many clicks, or if it's too complicated just to save an email. Our team's using normal Windows Server folders. They used to drag and drop emails directly in these folders for the most important emails. But for sure, we were missing tons of them, and tons of very important ones. Having to save it on a server and then to upload it in SharePoint and capture manually all metadata associated with an email, no one would ever do it. So Colligo has been it's been an essential tool to make sure that we were getting all of that information coming in through the mailboxes. In 2020, we know that all communications are coming in through the mailboxes.
I could imagine the amount of friction that in the way that you described it was as easy as drag and drop is into a Windows folder. The challenge was certainly getting it into SharePoint was a few more clicks and a little extra learning curve. However, the value of, if it was more friction-free, to put it into SharePoint, the value of having the metadata there, searchability, being able to put more stringent holds or information that is associated to that content, something that you couldn't do in the Windows Explorer type folder. But again, removing that friction was that key point that Colligo helped you make it more friction-free. And then you had that added value of actually having that right solution.
We've heard that a lot from our customers too. In parallel, if you think about things that we've done in the past couple of years with what internally our acronym is KFM, known folder move. The idea of how do I take a piece of content, and if I have to go through 7 or 8 steps to get it into a library, and then 5 or 6 to get it back to where I want it from, people throw their hands up. And so the answer, Microsoft's answer has been, well, let's not bring you into SharePoint. Let's bring SharePoint to you. So known folder move basically says, let's take things like your desktop and just synchronize it in OneDrive. So you've got all of the benefits of having it backed up and searchable and versionable without your having to do extra steps. And we know that there's lots of opportunities beyond just the desktop. And it's kind of great to hear about the way that Colligo is helping solve those challenges for you. So let's bring Michelle into the discussion. Michelle, could you introduce yourself and your role at Ovivo to our audience?
I'm the director of IT based in Montreal. And you probably know there's 1,000 employees working at Ovivo. We are spread out in 32 offices in 16 countries. Well, I'm responsible and accountable for everything related to information technology. So hardware, software, application, services. So going from the server to the cell phone to the cloud, it's all coming to me.
Yours is not the first customer industry that I've run into in water that's highly technological, and I'm just fascinated. I spent some time with another Microsoft customer 2 years ago in the UK in the water industry, and again, highly technological. Why is technology so essential to the water and the water treatment industries these days?
We're delivering industrial water systems and water applications to some very specific and very high-end markets. One of these markets is the power and energy market. Power and energy means nuclear power plant, gas-fired power plant, and all of these industries where the water is the essential component to produce the electricity. Any power plant is more or less just a boiler. So a boiler producing steam and the steam running a turbine producing electricity. You run it through, you heat it with nuclear energy or coal energy, gas energy. All of these markets, the plants can never stop. The water is essential. So all our equipment has to be delivered with a high level of documentation. We have to provide for every component in our systems full traceability from the steel manufacturers that has manufactured the steel that is used for the skids, and so on. And all of that means a huge amount of documents. And essential documents, we're not paid at the end if we're not handing over the document package, and if the document packages are not compliant. And so that includes all engineering phase, all fabrication phase, and quality control. So although it looks like simply producing water for high-end industrial market means documenting everything. And that's where the technologies associated with SharePoint and Colligo to ease the use of SharePoint came into the play.
Where you, of course, over the number of years have had various challenges with keeping up with the scale of documentation, the accuracy, the discoverability, and some other things. Can you start maybe a few years back when you considered and before you implemented Colligo, what was the document scenario like before the solution was put in place and the challenges that you faced? And then I think we'll transition to Roland to really talk about what was then put in place.
Different challenges. The first one is Michel mentioned it. We're a company that is delocated, so we have different locations in different countries. And although we have an office in one given country, the project we're working for can be anywhere around the world. So that the fact that we're not all co-located, we're not on the same server, the documentation is not in one single office, means that all the project documentation is segregated in all of these areas. And the problem we were facing is the discipline of maintaining a unique documentation structure, a standardized document structure, and having the discipline to have all documents there and people not to use their C drive and not to leave stuff in the mailboxes. That was one very important problem. The other one was the mailboxes. When an employee would leave the company, change project, change job, or move out from a project team to another project team, it was very difficult to recover in a centralized area all documentation, and the time wasted and the amount of effort wasted just to compile and recover documents when it's essential, when you get into a dispute or when you got close to a very important deadline. This caused a lot of issues and problems as well as cost.
I can imagine just hearing you describe it, the level of compliance that you both hold yourself to and you're required to meet. As people come into the company, obviously when information is on a desktop, the desktop compliance component, but then just the nature of when you need something, finding and sharing it shouldn't be a hurdle of where is it and can I access it? It's I know where it is and let me go get it. It should be a much easier step. Roland, with those challenges, obviously as a part of the descriptor to the solution that was required, how did you go about describing what Colligo does? And then if you can share what was actually put in place to help alleviate some of that challenge.
Sure, Mark. Ovivo came to us and we listened very carefully to their issues or their challenges. Like one of the big ones was, as they mentioned, the fact that there's turnover on a project. And we understand that these projects can run like 5 years and even longer. And you can imagine that in an organization that's working on something highly technical, having your project team turnover and having people retiring and so on, obviously the knowledge can get lost very easily. And so they really wanted us to help them get all the advantages out of SharePoint possible. So we wanted to give them an adoption strategy so that they can get their team deeper into SharePoint. And so we definitely helped them with a number of usability barriers. And the first one was streamline capture, getting the emails and critical attachments out of their inbox and into SharePoint was not a simple thing. But using Colligo, they can just click on a couple buttons and apply metadata and get it into SharePoint virtually in like seconds. And so we also do this without forcing them to change context. So they can just stay in their inbox and then they can go to their add-in and click on the buttons to select a location, put in some basic metadata, and then they're done. All right, they don't have to like alt-tab between screens and then come back and go, where was I? So we just try to keep them focused on the task at hand and remove as much friction as possible between going from Outlook to SharePoint. And then on the flip side, so if the capture thing is taken care of, they still need to be able to go in and look at those documents. So previously, when they would just file things in folders, obviously it would be a really simple thing to just go down, look in the folders, expand down to subfolders. So what Colligo did is we did that exact same format where we moved SharePoint into the left-hand margin of Outlook so that you could explore SharePoint just like you would a regular Outlook folder. And so that was really powerful to them. So from the user point of view, it's just like filing it to another folder.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, the pictures that you get to paint on the radio here. I've seen Colligo run. It is very much consistent with what we were talking about before, the idea of, don't push users into SharePoint. Bring SharePoint to them where they're hanging out.
Right. Yeah, and also like the fact that we wanted to save them time. One of the biggest barriers to employees using SharePoint was, well, I have to put in metadata. Well, how much metadata do I have to put in? So obviously there's lots of metadata in an email, like, who's the sender, who's it to, when was it sent, what's the subject line, things like that. And so we're able to actually extract that key metadata out of the email and put it into SharePoint columns. So that's a huge time saver. And of course, that if you have the better you have your metadata set up, the better your searches are. And so that was the other thing, being able to search SharePoint virtually through Outlook and find the information that they want. And the up-to-date information shared, it's not stuck in anybody's inbox. And then lastly, we help them go mobile. Obviously, they're not always in an office, and they're sometimes in very remote locations. And so they can actually designate certain libraries to be offline. It's just very seamlessly, they can designate an offline library, file emails to it, and maybe they don't even file the email, maybe they take out the attachment. And then when they're on the road, they can then go in and look at it very easily.
I was just going to ask Jean-Francois, if you look at that from when the solution was put into place to where you are now, what has that journey been like for the 1,000 employees that are leveraging the service? If, those that do use this service, what has their day looked like before the solution, and what does it look like now to hope that what you wanted to achieve, you've achieved?
It's actually we're still in deployment in different divisions of the company. But if I take an example of those using it more intensively, we got a very big project that is we call that a cost plus project. It's a $200 million cost plus project where you've got to substantiate every hour and every bolt to be paid at the end of the month. For that project team, who is dealing with back and forth contractual communications with 2 or 3 letters per day in, 2 or 3 letters per day out, tons of emails, and all of these letters and emails all connected together. The capability to create clever libraries, to tie documents in with documents out, to have automated document registers, and the capability to search and identify in a click the documentation they are looking at. That changed the whole. That not only changed their whole day-to-day work, but it changed also the whole contractual documentation and discussion with the customer, showing to our customers that we are very organized and to the point. And when our people are getting to a meeting, they're getting with the list of the outstanding communications and the list of the communications that are replied and replied by the letter number 3 and letter number 4. So and it added a very great layer of professionalism in everything, as well as easing all the contract and project management.
Yeah, I believe from what I hear you're saying, it moves it from not just being a really great solution to store content in the right way with the right metadata, but actually that it maps to the workflow, as manual or as automated as that may be, where the end user, your employees that are working across the globe with different customers, and throughout that day they're working with different parts of the different projects, they're able to manage, and other people are able to probably then get great visibility into the state of a document, the state of a project, and like you said, put their best foot forward to be professional all the way through.
Let's stay with what Mark just said about the users, because, I love what Colligo does, and I love hearing about the way it's being applied at Ovivo, because let's face it, we're all geeks. We love to think about information architecture and metadata and those sorts of things. And so the theory of it is great. I'd love to know more about what are you hearing from your users that are experiencing this technology? How do they like it? What do they like about it?
From what Colligo provides in terms of capability on the top of what we can do with SharePoint, Colligo is a bit transparent for them. They don't really know they go through Colligo. They know they got a window to SharePoint in their Outlook. That's the way they see Colligo. So for them, they don't really realize they're using Colligo. They realize that they've got a capability, a document management system. They know it's based on SharePoint, and it goes very easily through their Outlook. And they know that when they throw something with a drag and drop from a document, an attachment, an important something, or when they got a bundle of documents to throw in SharePoint, they know they can easily do it through Outlook, more easily than directly with SharePoint. So that's ease of use they can see, knowing that they will have the pop-up with all the metadata to be filled in, and they can be sure the document will end up at the right place in SharePoint. From the user perspective, it's transparent.
So let me summarize that. The users love it because things have gotten to be faster, cleaner, easier to use, and they don't see a lot of extra software. They just think IT made SharePoint better, and IT gets the credit.
Somehow.
Yes.
Chris, what some of our customers tell us is that when they're using Colligo, when they think of SharePoint, when they think of Colligo, they think of SharePoint. Like they kind of see them as kind of one unit. And I'm actually kind of happy that Ovivo was mentioning that we're kind of invisible. I think we've achieved our goal. If we're just sort of transparent, we're just part of the workflow invisibly. We're just kind of adding value without having to stand up and say, "Hey, you're using Colligo now."
So, question to Ovivo, where do you see this going in the next couple of years, and how you want to either just maintain this service because it's exactly what you needed, or as the industry changes, which from your website I read a lot of in your world, there's a lot of change in terms of your industry with what different requirements are, with what the different expectations are for the water delivery and the systems that then support the treatment of the water. How does this service support or change over time in what you need, more the definition of what do you require as things change?
We want to base our content management with SharePoint. This is our strategy. So if you're, for the part of your question that, asking about what our intention about that is keeping SharePoint and getting to know it better, getting to use it better. And Colligo is certainly part of this way of it. Make it easy for the employees to adopt SharePoint. That's it.
But if the Colligo solution was the first entry point for SharePoint to be a part of how you build your systems in Ovivo, where do you go next now that you have SharePoint in-house for the specific solution and you're starting to think of using SharePoint beyond the document capture and the storage device? What are you thinking next about using SharePoint for from how you support your employees?
As Jean-François mentioned, the SharePoint is not used by everybody. It's not easy to get people to organize their data, our data, the Ovivo data. And right now we're using, most of the employees are using file folders, and we want to bring this most of the data to SharePoint. So our challenge really in the next few years is getting an enterprise content management strategy, in place really. We have it, we just need to implement that and making people to adopt it. And that's a challenge for the next 2 to 3 years. We have so many documents and we need to get better control over it. This is where we're going.
Part of the challenge is for us to develop some internal expertise as well as using SharePoint properly and developing and overcoming all of the needs in terms of not only document content, but list accesses, control of accesses, workflows, and sharing and getting authorization on documents and everything. So all of these needs in terms of workflow, we need to develop that internal knowledge and that internal capability for people to have to see how they can better use and better leverage the capability of SharePoint and all the tools around.
Yeah, Mark, could I just add, Ovivo, they're using SharePoint Server. Our commitment is to allow Ovivo to move forward to Office 365 in time. I mean, there's no hurry, but when they do, we have our products that are specifically made for Office 365, and in particular, the new type of add-in where you don't have to actually install something on the desktop. You just kind of provision it from the tenant itself. And so that's kind of where we're putting a lot of our focus and development to kind of bring people, once they get into Office 365, they're going to get rid of all the IT complexity of having to deploy applications and so on. And so they can just pick a group of people or pick individuals, and then from the tenant, it'll just push down our add-in, and then it sort of automatically just starts working. And the customers that we have that are on that, they just love it because IT doesn't have to get involved anymore. We can upgrade the product, we can improve it, add features, and IT doesn't have to make a big deal of it. They just everything just works.
To summarize that, so for customers who are still back in on-premises, you have solutions. As customers embrace the cloud, you can also help them there. I think that's a key takeaway.
That's correct.
I really would love to get, as we're wrapping up, Ovivo's perspective on this. Just hearing you talk about the value that you're able to bring to content, the way that you enrich it. This is definitely, a core investment area for Microsoft. Is how do we do things with metadata? How do we bring better experiences? As we've just recently announced, we are refreshing and modernizing the entire taxonomy and managed metadata service. So we hear a lot from our customers about once you make the metadata better, we want to do more with search. We want to do more with workflow. We want to do more with compliance. When you think about all the things that metadata opens up for you, which Microsoft technologies do you next want to turn to be able to do more with your content?
So we're not evaluating that right now. We're still working on getting people to use SharePoint. Really, we're at that stage. We are also evaluating Office 365, as I mentioned, but really for the next few years will be for migrating to Exchange on the Office 365 and Office, then eventually SharePoint. But that's in 2 to 3 years. We're not really seriously evaluating new tools to manage the documents right now, except for SharePoint.
Throughout the discussion, we certainly have seen how Colligo has provided a current solution on top of SharePoint, which really is a start to your content management. And we heard you considering and thinking how to use more SharePoint for that internal enterprise content management. And we certainly wish you luck, and we are always here, and Colligo is certainly always there to help you evaluate what you do next. And we will always try to give you that carrot of thinking about what other technology you can leverage. I know once you're in SharePoint, there's a lot of value then to build on top of that. We want to turn the conversation to round out to get more out of your expert heads based on what you've accomplished and, of course, who you are and what you do. We first want to run through a set of questions just to get your take on some other aspects of technology. And the first one is for Jean-Francois. This is hopefully a simple one. But with the device that you have, whether it's iOS, Android, or other, the notifications on your device, do you leave them on or off, and why?
Depends which notifications, but mainly off because I can't support to have all of these notifications all day round. And I've got an iWatch, so my iWatch give me a vibration for the important notifications I've decided that I want to keep. But phones and tablets and all notifications are off.
So you like to be focused and notified, but notified of the important things.
Yeah.
So our last question is for Roland. And if you get this right, Roland, both Chris and I are going to give you some commission because we always love to get this one as succinct as possible. Are you ready, Roland?
No pressure. Go ahead.
If asked, how do you describe what Microsoft 365 is?
Oh, that is a really good question. I always try to use Lego as a metaphor for how you can do things with Office 365 because it's so familiar. I'm not saying that Office 365 is blocky, but what I'm saying is that it's very modular, it's very flexible. I think of it as the kind of the gray base plate that kind of like underlies any solution, and then you kind of build on top of it. Because what I find what is really interesting is, you can have a customer using it, and they'll use it in their particular way, but then their supplier will be using it as well, but then a totally different way, and then their accountant and their lawyer. So everybody's using Office 365, but they're grabbing the different Lego pieces, so to speak, and kind of forming their own solution that fits their business. All right, so you need a wheel, don't make a new wheel, just grab a Lego wheel.
Yeah, you just reminded me, this is now a number of years ago, but for one of the birthday parties for my child, my son, we had gotten everybody the same set of Legos in a big jar, and everybody got their own jar. And by the end of the activity, which was, a little bit haphazard and fun in many ways, everybody had built something very different, but they all had the same pieces to start with. So I 100% agree with you, and we're going to push that through our marketing leadership to see if we can get Lego trademarked in how we describe Microsoft 365.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I had Lego, a Microsoft customer, on stage with us a year and a half ago at Ignite.
Oh, yeah?
And talking about, they used their own metaphor to say, We loved the building blocks. It's like it's our own thing. We need to wrap this up, so I'm not going to get to ask my obligatory sports question about Canucks versus Canadians.
Oh, good.
So to wrap us up, we always like to talk about events before we close out the show. And on our partner series, we want to give opportunity to Colligo to highlight some events that you're either running or will be attending that people can come and chat with you, learn more about Colligo solutions. So Roland, any events that you want to highlight?
We run on the model of, we have event on demand. So if you go to our website, colligo.com, colligo.com, you can click on the button that says, I want a demo. And then I or some other engineer is going to get on with you in your time zone, and we're going to walk you through it. Because we find that just showing people and having that conversation leads to solutions, and leads to a good relationship. And that's what we're all about. And so just go to the colligo.com, and you can also subscribe to our news page there, and so that you can keep up to date on webinars, white papers. We have a number of MVP interviews that happen, and as we update products, you'll also get an email. So just go to the colligo.com and go to the news page and click on subscribe.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And of course, as you have more news to share, we look forward to being able to champion it here on the IntraZone.
Great.
I'd love to be able to share with the audience, where can they go to get more information about Ovivo and about Colligo?
Oh, for Colligo, go to colligo.com. That's colligo.com.
For Ovivo, it's www.ovivowater.com.
Excellent. We will put all those links in the show notes, and I've also grabbed the main Twitter handles for both Ovivo and Colligo for people that want to follow and see what's going on in the industry and certainly how these solutions are playing out across the world. So Roland, Jean-Francois, and Michel, thank you for joining the IntraZone. Thanks for sharing more of what Ovivo does in the real world and certainly what it does in terms of basing a Colligo solution to support that. And, of course, thank you all for joining us.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. It's been a very, very great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we certainly encourage you to go to colligo.com, sign up for a demo, and you'll get Roland or one of his colleagues on the line and see what they offer. Thank you to our guests, Roland from Colligo and both Jean-Francois and Michel from Ovivo.
Check out our show page to links for everything we talked about today and more. Go to aka.ms/the IntraZone. And if you're interested in other shows by Microsoft, check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts.
Send us your questions or feedback for the SharePoint engineering and product teams. You can email us at theintrazone@microsoft.com or on Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues about the show and help share our SharePoint love. Remember, the IntraZone works equally well in light mode and in dark mode. And remember to subscribe at your local hockey rink or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks again for listening, working through all of Chris's sports references. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. You've been listening to The IntraZone, a show about the Microsoft 365 partner-powered intelligent intranet.